Hi, friends. I wanted to go live with you here today for maybe the first time ever. I think this is actually the first time I've ever come on live, just by myself, not doing an interview or anything, just to chat about water. I have a few things that I want to share, and if anyone wants to come on and ask questions, then we can chat about whatever water topics that you're interested in. But I especially wanted to go over, in general, what makes water healthy, what constitutes healthy water, and also to go over some of the different kinds of therapeutic waters. And so, hi everyone who's coming on: Shayla, Thea, Weber, Hippie, Amy, Maddie. Hi everyone, welcome. So yeah, we're going to go over some of the more therapeutic kinds of water, and some of these topics are a little bit more in depth and a little bit more complex. So if you're just beginning your water journey and you want more so just the simple, straight up, how do I take my swag water and turn it into living water, and you just want a step by step process, for that you definitely want to get my Navigating the Waters e-course. It's available at waterslife.teachable.com. The link is in my bio. And that is just 10 or 20 minutes a day for 7 days, and it'll equip you with all of the tools, all of the steps, and a deep understanding of the science behind why we do each of those steps: filter, structure, balance, and energize. And it also has, it's not just, buy these tools. It has DIY methods and free methods and at-home remedies and that kind of thing. So it contains the full spectrum, everything you need to empower your hydration strategy in a way that can just be simple and make it into a habit every day. But yeah, we're going to get into some of the more interesting and some of the more exciting things this time. So hi, Rafa. Oh, he's my neighbor. Hi, Rafa. Hi, Hannah. Hi, Alston. Pascodar. Hi, everyone. So thanks for joining. I get so camera shy on these things. It's okay, I'll get over it. All right, hi, Junglist. So I'm thinking there are about 8-ish. There are probably far more, but today we're just going to go over about 8 different factors that constitute the health of a body of water. Whether we're talking about a body of water in nature, or your own body of water, or a body of water in your glass that you're going to drink. Fundamentally, all bodies of water, because they are living beings, have very similar needs in the end. Now, when we think about the health of water, we tend to just think of hygiene. That's it. We tend to think of water filtration, water purification. How can you take the toxic crap out of the water? And as long as it's clean, as long as it's pure, we have this idea that that means it's healthy water. But that would be like saying that just because you took a shower, that makes you healthy. Well, that makes you clean. But health is a much broader spectrum of influences that constitute your mind, your body, your emotions, your spirit. There are a lot of different factors that go into your health besides just hygiene. And the same is true for water. Hi, Laura. Hi, Sinan. Hi, Mel. So stop me at any time and ask a question if you have a question about these different topics. But I wanted to start with some of the other factors of the health of bodies of water. So one of them, for example, is movement. Movement is such a crucial aspect of your health as a body of water. I'm sure you've probably heard that sitting is the new smoking, and that actually being stagnant all day, every day, can have as negative an impact on your health as smoking cigarettes. So when our body water stagnates, then our chi also stagnates. And if you look into Eastern medicine, stagnation of chi is basically the root of all disease in the body. When we're not moving, our body water can't flow. We're basically this complex system of hydraulic networks, and hydraulic literally means movement by water. So if you're not moving, then your fascia, whose primary role is as an irrigation network to deliver drops of water to every single cell in your body, then it's not able to deliver that hydration into the more hard to reach areas of your body Likewise, your lymphatic system also only moves when you move. And hydration isn't just a matter of what we absorb. Hydration is also a matter of how well our body waters can transition between the various hydrological cycles within our bodies, meaning nutrient carrying water into the cells and detoxifying water going out of the cells. And a big part of that is lymphatic drainage. So if you're not moving, your lymph isn't flowing, and that's going to affect your hydration too. But the exact same is true of water in nature and the water that you drink as well. Because water in nature is never stagnant. She's always moving. She's always transitioning between different states and phases between one watershed and another. Even if you look at a seemingly stagnant lake, for example, there are different minor currents of temperature and density gradients that are shifting and moving the water underneath the surface of the lake. The only time that water ever becomes truly stagnant is when she comes into the care of human beings. And human beings have this tendency to imprison water in bottles, in tanks, and storage containers, and all of that. And when that happens, she starts to go to sleep. She starts to become dormant. A lot of people use the term dead water, and I don't love that term because all water can be brought back to life. All water can be revived. But most of the water that we come into contact with is comatose, literally comatose. All of the bonds of the hydrogen atoms have broken apart. That's what we call that bulk water. That's where the hydrogen bonds are forming and breaking apart billions of times per second. There's no cohesion. So what happens when water moves, whether that's in a spiral, in a vortex, in a flow form, there are a lot of different ways to bring movement to water. There's even an indigenous culture, I forget which one it is, that before every single time they drink water, they always gurgle the water in their throats first, just to bring more movement to it. Because when water moves together, then that synchrony bonds the molecules together as well. So one of the most effective ways to bring water back to life is through vortexing and through flow forms. There are numerous water structures, vortexes, flow forms available at waterislife.shop if you want to get something like that, like a Mayu, or I have these great portable vortexing bottles. But water needs to move to be healthy, to be happy, to be vibrant, alive, and energized. I made a post recently about how when water is moving, it actually opens up her sensory organs and she actually becomes more perceptive to her environment. And so that's usually the best time to actually program water with your thoughts, prayers, intentions, music, vibrations, whatever that is. Hi Courtney, hi Loretta, hi Merkava, everybody, welcome. So yeah, that's the first factor of health, other than just hygiene, other than just filtering your water. You want to make sure you get it moving as well. So then the next factor of health, and typically this is what we first think of when we're thinking of our own health, is usually our nutrition, right? Well, just like we need to eat, we need to partake of the earth element by eating food that was grown in the earth. Water also needs to eat. She also needs nourishment. She needs to partake of the earth element by taking in minerals. And when minerals dissolve into water, we call those electrolytes. And electrolytes are part of what gives water the capacity to carry an electrical charge, to carry hydroelectric energy into our bodies. And so some different kinds of water that are very high in minerals, that are enormously therapeutic, would be, for example, Canton marine plasma. So that's actually my favorite electrolyte supplement. If you want to bring more nourishment into your water, if you want to feed your water, definitely. I mean, there's several different ones. I'll mention a few of them, but definitely Canton marine plasma is the top. So it's harvested from an annual plankton bloom. It's this giant vortex that happens out in the Pacific Ocean, and it mixes together nutrients from the ocean floor and pulls them up to the surface of the water and spirals them together in just such a way that when it's harvested, and then it goes through a specific refinement process that actually brings it to the quality of actually being a pharmaceutical quality. It's no longer a medication. It used to be listed as a medicine in the European Physician's Desk reference. So it's pharmaceutical grade. In fact, clinicians back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they opened about 69 free clinics in Europe and Africa, and they treated people with a variety of different conditions and illnesses, and they had success rates, curative rates, over 90%. What other medicine in the world has a cure rate of over 90%, even with illnesses that Western medicine had written off as incurable? For example, people who had been born with genetic abnormalities, and women who had on multiple occasions given birth to up to 9 stillbirths, or babies who were born with genetic abnormalities. They started receiving IV infusions of cantal marine plasma and gave birth to healthy babies for the first time. So, I mean, this stuff it's like the primordial soup. I really think of it as like a concentrated broth of everything necessary to sustain life. It has every single element on the periodic table. It has RNA, DNA, vitamins, enzymes, fatty acids, proteins, you name it. So really, if you want to nourish your water, if you want to feed your water, then when it comes to food for your water, cantal marine plasma is definitely my favorite one. But there are a lot of other ways that you can do it as well. You can feed your water with ormus elements. So similar to electrolytes, they do carry a charge, but ormus elements are mono and diatomic elements that, because they have such a high spin state, they're basically pure light. They're like spinning at an enormously high vibration that is basically bringing pure light energy into your body. A lot of ancients considered ormus elements to be like the philosopher's stone, to be like the gold that alchemists used to try to distill. They would be taking various materials and trying to distill them into gold. And what they were trying to do is condense the ormus gold within them. And there's different kinds of ormus. There's ormus gold, ormus silver, all different kinds of ormus. And it's found most commonly in nature at the highest mountaintop springs, the most pristine springs, and actually in fresh morning dew as well. So that's probably the cheapest, quickest way to go get your ormus, is just go lick some leaves first thing in the morning before sunrise. But for those of you who don't necessarily want to go do that, we have ormus in the shop as well at waterislife.shop. So that's another really great way to feed your water. I mean, when we're talking about feeding water, it's really important because most of the water that we come into contact with is actually hungry. She's starving. She's what hydrologists call an aggressive solvent. So an aggressive solvent, we've all heard that water is the universal solvent, right? She can basically lick anything to pieces, right? She's always consuming. She's always bringing the outside world inside of herself and making it a part of herself, and being informed and patterned by, if she's in a river, she's going to be taking in the geomagnetic rock formations and little bits of all of the stones and all of the fish and everything that go inside of her and make her a whole being. But what we do is we process water, we filter water to the point where there's absolutely nothing left. Reverse osmosis and distillation create an aggressive solvent by taking absolutely everything from the water, so that not only is there no molecular coherence anymore, but there's also absolutely no mineral content whatsoever. So she's looking to fill herself back up again, and as a result, she ends up leaching from her environment. So if you take purified reverse osmosis or distilled water, or generally purified water, and you put it in a plastic bottle, because she's so hungry, because she's an aggressive solvent, she's actually going to leach far more xenoestrogens from that plastic than if you were to take a spring water or a mineral water or something like that and put it into plastic. And unfortunately, it does the same thing in our own bodies. So when you drink that kind of water, it can actually leach minerals from your body as well, which actually makes you more dehydrated over time. So feeding water is really important, making sure that she's really well nourished. Other ways that you can do that are through Mayu makes a really great mineral drops that you can get that are based on different spring waters around the world. There's also Minbiotics, which is one of my favorite electrolyte supplements. It comes from a certain kind of volcanic ash, and so not only does it increase the electrolytes in the water, but it can also act as a kind of filter because it will neutralize any toxins in the water when you put it in there as well. So if you're traveling or if you're in a pinch and you don't have a filter with you, but you want to feed and clean your water at the same time, then biotics is great for that. You can also feed your water with nanocolloidal suspensions, like I'm sure you've probably heard of colloidal silver and that kind of thing. Not only does she take in the earth element, she also takes in, metallic ions, only the beneficial metallic ions. I'm not recommending that there's a big difference between like putting heavy metals in your water, putting something like, nanocolloidal silver or something like that. There's also black water, which is a natural phenomenon of water that is actually black because it's so full of fulvic and humic compounds. Fulvic and humic minerals are two of the most important kinds of trace minerals that we can feed our water with, because they're something that our soil and our food is largely missing. And most people don't realize that actually if we're drinking natural spring water, fresh harvested from nature, that itself is a natural mineral supplement. Spring waters generally, they have a range of TDS, or total dissolved solids, from a very soft water to a very hard water. But either way, if you're drinking water from your environment, it's actually nourishing you with the minerals that you need to thrive specifically in that environment. It's actually making you more well-suited for your own habitat. You can also add silica. So there's a certain kind of organified silica that they have found in the highest quality springs in the world, like for example in the Hunza region of I think it's near Pakistan. It's one of the blue zones in the world where people live longer than they live pretty much anywhere else in the world. For decades they considered it to be Shangri-La, like the real Shangri-La, because people would live well into their hundreds. Being a centenarian was par for the course in this area, and actually women would even give birth over the age of 100. And so there were numerous anthropologists and researchers who came to the Hunza Valley trying to discover what is their secret, what are they eating that's so different, or how do they live that's so different. And while I'm sure there are a number of lifestyle factors at play, the Hunza people continuously told these researchers, well, it's because of the water that we drink. And so finally, Dr. Flanagan? No, it was Dr. Henry Coanda. Dr. Flanagan was his protege. So between the two of them, they actually studied this water for 60 years. But it started with Dr. Henry Coanda, and he came and studied their very special water, which was almost kind of cloudy, almost kind of milky. It's something you see in other areas as well. And what they found was that it contained this very specific kind of silica that created these calathrate geometries within the water that acted as kind of these like resonating magnetic spheres almost, that would draw water molecules to them in a very patterned, in a very structured way, and that would create more structure over the course of a few hours. So I have that on the shop as well. Dr. Coanda again passed his research to Dr. Flanagan, and then Dr. Flanagan created these crystal energy drops that are available in the shop, and they have all of this silica in them that you leave it to mature overnight. So you leave it for about 8 hours or so, and in the morning it is incredibly beautifully structured water. So another really great option for on the go, and another thing that lasts for quite a while as well, because you get a full bottle. I have them over there. I should have brought them. I should have brought all these little goodies over here. I can show you all the little things next time. It's my first live. So yeah, feed your water. Feed yourself good nutrition. Feed your water good nutrition. She deserves it. Christopher says, Patrick Flanagan worked with my grandfather. Really? Oh, how interesting. Tell us more about that. If you want to leave a comment and tell us, that sounds like an interesting story. Cool. Or at least DM me with the story. And now I'm really curious. Flanagan was amazing. If anybody wants to learn more about their work, there's a bookstore section on my shop. If you go to waterslife.shop and then you look for, I forget if it says library or bookstore, but it has all of my top water book recommendations. If any of you guys are water nerds like me and you just want to geek out and learn everything you can, Dr. Flanagan's book was called Elixir of the Ageless. Elixir of the Ageless. And it'll go deeper into the science around how crystal energy drops work. So you're very calming to listen to, and then there's all the, oh, thanks. That's sweet. Thanks so much for being here with us. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Christopher says, microclusters and mega hydrate were first marketed through my grandfather's company called Light Force. Okay, cool. Nice. Well, props to your grandfather for doing great work. Yeah, we definitely need to make this much more common knowledge because it's accessible, you know? It is. These are not expensive products. In general, I would say with water alchemy tools, most of the time you get what you pay for. And so some of the more advanced tools create really, really highly energized, highly coherent water, and you notice a huge difference with them. And then there are other products that are just overpriced and they don't make that much of a difference. I don't have those in my shop. Anything I try and I'm just like, not worth the price. I don't put those in the shop. But then there are some things that make a big difference but are also enormously affordable. And I would say crystal energy drops is one of those. Very affordable, makes a big difference. One bottle lasts a long time. The same with Minbiotics, as I mentioned before. So yeah, we need to make this more common knowledge. Okay, next is breath work. So we all know that for us to be healthy and happy and vibrant and alive, we need to breathe properly. We need to take plenty of energizing, oxygenating breaths, and that's one of the reasons why yogic breathwork practices are so enormously healing, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally as well. And just like us, our water also needs to breathe. She needs to exchange gases like oxygen and carbonic acid and excess hydrogen and that sort of thing. In fact, Dr. Tom Cowan actually said that he believed that one day science would discover that the dissolved gases inside of water are actually just as important for hydration as the water itself. And yet this is something that we don't pay much attention to because bottled water has almost no dissolved gases left in it. Anytime water is left stagnant, she can't really breathe that well. And this is another one of the important factors around movement, because one of the ways that water breathes is through movement. So some of these vortexes or flow forms, not only do they structure the water, but they also aerate the water as well, which again just brings more oxygenation to your whole system, your whole body, your whole bloodstream. So my favorite extremely well aerated water that's basically just been through like intense heavy pranayama breath work. I don't know if any of you guys practice breath work here, but it is it's powerful. It's one of my favorite healing practices in the world. And you know that feeling that you get after an intense breath work session, you're on cloud 9. And I believe we all deserve to feel that way all the time, but without walking around hyperventilating all day long. Another way to get very similar benefits is by drinking hyperoxygenated water. And so, one of my favorite companies that produces amazing, super stabilized oxygen, because with all of these different methods of aerating water, whether we're talking about increasing the oxygen or increasing the hydrogen, the trick is keeping it stable, because these are gases, they're volatile compounds, right? They're going to volatilize off of the water. But Ophora is the brand, and they've created very, very stabilized oxygenated water. So definitely check out Ophora water. If you go to waterslife.shop, go to the bottled waters collection. Their shipping prices are a little high, but it's worth it. It's worth it, especially if you're dealing with any kind of chronic ailment. Not that any of this is designed to treat or diagnose any kind of illness, for caveats here, but it is just enormously healing. And it's actually the only thing that I know of, and please drop a comment or DM me if you've heard of something else that can raise your phase angle in a short time scale. So typically your phase angle is a metric that takes a while to shift. It takes a lot of lifestyle habits and practices over time to shift your phase angle. And phase angle is just a measurement of your body's capacity to hydrate. So the higher your phase angle, the higher your level of prana, mana, chi, internal cellular conductivity, cellular voltage, and the higher your ability to actually bring water into your cells, because that's an electrical process. It's a hydroelectric process, right? So when we're talking about your level of energy, conductivity, vitality, voltage, it's the exact same measurement as your level of hydration. So again, the phase angle test is invaluable as a tool for measuring that, but raising your phase angle typically just takes a lot of time, dietary practices. These are the kind of things that I work with clients one-on-one when we do, one-on-one hydration consultations, and we develop a well-rounded hydration strategy for people. It has a lot more to do with lifestyle practices that prime your body for hydration, far more than it does with the water that you drink. We're kind of going about it backwards in this world. We're like, what kind of water can I drink? But most of us are just irrigating, whereas we actually want to absorb the water by raising our phase angle. So bathing in Ophora water, I would imagine drinking it as well, but the thing that I read about it was specifically about bathing in Ophora water actually raised people's phase angles significantly in a very short period of time, which I consider somewhat miraculous. Breath of Jaguar said, convince my mother to purchase Spring Aqua based on your research. She loves it, and it's helping on her healing journey post-cancer treatment. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah, the Spring Aqua is amazing. Amazing. I mean, if anyone wants just like a one-stop solution that is the go-to, most convenient, most impressive, best bang for your buck, like you just want to make your water solution simple, the Spring Aqua does all of these steps. It filters, structures, balances, energizes, and suffuses with molecular hydrogen. So molecular hydrogen is really, it's kind of the other side of aerating your water, or helping your water to breathe. So on the one hand, you have oxygenating your water, and on the other hand, you have adding molecular hydrogen, stabilized molecular hydrogen to your water. And this, oh my gosh, there have been hundreds and hundreds of studies on it at this point, and it's emerging as one of the most effective overall solutions. It's a panacea. It really is a panacea for your entire body, because, so there was this Nobel Prize winner named Albert Saint-Georges who said that hydrogen is the fuel of life. And it's true. Really, your cells convert it into ATP, and I'm sure all of us have heard that ATP is the macromolecule of energy, right? It's how it's like your mitochondria are like the batteries, the powerhouses of the cell, and your mitochondria produce ATP. Well, what Dr. Gilbert Ling discovered was that there's actually no more energy fundamentally in ATP than in anything else. What ATP actually does is it structures your intracellular fluid. And because your intracellular fluid is structured, your cell has the capacity for more energy. So how do you create ATP? Through a process called ATP synthase. And ATP synthase is almost entirely dependent on hydrogen. So basically you have these little nanoturbines on your cells. Speaking of air, I'm going to turn the air on because it's getting really warm in here. We're in the tropics down here in Tulum. So basically you have these, they're kind of like wind turbines, and the wind that powers them is hydrogen. And so there are different kinds of hydrogen, and this is really important when we're talking about this breath category with water. When we're talking about water breathing, what kind of hydrogen is it breathing? If you're breathing fresh mountain air, it's going to have a much different effect on you than if you're breathing in, city smog and traffic. And the same is true with water. There are different kinds of hydrogen that will nourish the water very differently. So the three main kinds, the only three kinds, are tritium, deuterium, and protium. Tritium is really rare, so we're not going to talk about that. Cancer Cured Me said, do you like the Spring Aqua more than the Kangen machine because of the process of electrolysis that basically traumatizes the water and exposes it to EMFs? In short, yes. If you want a much longer explanation of why I never liked Kangen even before I found Spring Aqua, I have 2 20-minute videos available on that. You'd have to scroll down a ways on Instagram, but you can go to my YouTube and find them pretty easily. And then I also have a recent video that compares Spring Aqua and Kangen side by side. compares their filtration, their structure, their ionization, their mineralization, the ORP, the pricing, the warranty, the pH, everything, and basically Spring Aqua beats Kangen in every single category. In short, it's much cheaper and much, much more effective. The hydrogen that it infuses is far more stable, and it's more of this protium hydrogen rather than deuterium hydrogen. So with Kangen water, you end up with the same relative ratios of protium and deuterium as are in the source water. And most people are using it with tap water, which is very high in deuterium. It's around like 145 parts per million deuterium in most tap waters. And so with the Kangen, it'll maintain that ratio, and depending on the quality of the cathodes and how old the machine is, it could even be increasing that deuterium level by adding additional neutrons to the hydrogen. So whereas the Spring Aqua, it just suffuses de novo protium hydrogen instead, and the hydrogen is much more stable, so it's going to last in the water a lot longer. So yeah, go back and find those videos if you want a lot more context. But yeah, so talking about I'm getting off on all these tangents, but we're talking about the way your cells produce energy through ATP synthase. And when deuterium hydrogen goes through these little wind turbines, basically, it's like the difference between, do you know those machines that they're tennis ball machines, they suck in a tennis ball and then they shoot it out so you can practice tennis? I was on the tennis team in high school. I was terrible. I have awful memories of these machines. But imagine if you were to try to put a softball through the machine instead of a tennis ball. It wouldn't be able to go through, right? It's just simply too big. And so that's what happens when we try to put deuterium hydrogen through the ATP synthase process. It's basically like the difference between using a clean burning fuel, like a gas in your car, or putting like thick, gluggy, viscous oil into your engine. It just wouldn't be able to run. And so when we're talking about giving our water breath, enlivening our water with oxygen, with hydrogen, with aeration, we want to make sure that we're using protium hydrogen. And again, just hundreds and hundreds of studies have been done on this and the effectiveness of the treatment of all kinds of illnesses, just innumerable health benefits that we will continue to be discovering for years to come, because again, hydrogen is the fuel of life. So it really is one of the most, if not the most important factor in water's health. In fact, if you look at, Chris says, need to sign off. Oh, awesome. Thanks for joining us, Chris. And for anybody who has to leave early, I'm gonna post this on my page so you can always come back to it. So some of the most healing springs in the entire world, like the spring water in Lourdes, France. Drop a comment if any of you guys have heard of Lourdes, France, and the enormously, profoundly miraculous healing water there. I mean, there have been saints sighted at this spring, and pilgrims venture from all over the world to drink of this sacred spring water. Same in Dandana, India, same in Tlacote, Mexico, and there's just a handful of these all over the world. I think it's really interesting. I've been studying a lot about theology and water, for years, but especially in a Christian context recently. It's just kind of really caught my attention. This is a total tangent, but I do find it really interesting that many, many saints are sighted near these springs, and I can go into my theories around that, but we're not going to do that this time, just so we can stay a little bit more cohesive. But anyway, what they've found with all of these spring waters, what they have in common, not only structure, several other factors, of course, but the most decisive difference between this water and others is that they have far greater levels of atomic and molecular hydrogen dissolved in the water. So, the most healing waters in the world, highest levels of atomic and molecular hydrogen. So you definitely want to make sure that your water is breathing well. So we've gone over hygiene, movement, nourishment, breathing. Please make another live on that topic. I'm thinking about making a full video on it. I'm thinking about making a whole blog post on it. Although it's so in-depth, there's so much to it. I kind of want to make an entire course about it. But in the meantime, for anyone who's interested in water and theology, I actually have a workbook on the topic. It's $22 if you go to waterslife.teachable.com and then scroll down to where it says Water Scripture Workbook. It goes over what is holy water and the significance of holy water in all of the different religions in the entire world. And it goes over different prayer practices and ceremonial practices and scriptural teachings from sacred traditions, specifically religious traditions all over the world throughout time. There's another one that goes more specifically into indigenous stories, lore, mythology, practices, rituals, creation stories around water, if you're more interested in that side of water spirituality. And that one is called the Mythos and Creation Workbook. And then there's another one that is specifically all about kind of where spirit meets science, about water as an interface with the quantum field, water as an orgone generator and an accumulator of etheric energy, and goes into the science behind all that. So if you're interested in water and spirituality, I got you covered with those. But anyway, let's continue with this for today. So one of the other most important things that you as a body of water need to keep you healthy is quality relationships. So we all need connection. We are social creatures, and isolation has been found to be one of the foremost determining factors for chronic illnesses. In fact, the former U.S. Health Secretary, the former U.S., what do they call it? Surgeon General, Health Secretary. So the former U.S. Surgeon General actually put out a book a year or two ago. I think it was about a year before the pandemic started. And it was all about the epidemic of loneliness and how isolation itself was one of the leading causes of disease and one of the leading factors in determining whether someone who does have a chronic illness whether that illness will be fatal for them. So overall fatality is highly linked to isolation. And the same is true with water. Believe it or not, water is a very social creature, just like we are as bodies of water. And so basically, when we talk about the structure of water, what we're actually talking about is hydrogen bonding, how the hydrogen atoms come together and the different kinds of bonds that they create. We're not only talking about the strength of the bonds, which determines the level of structure. So people will often ask me, is this water structured or unstructured? And that's not actually, it's a spectrum. So you can't really say it is structured or it's not structured. You can say it's more structured or it's less structured. But even in totally bulk water, occasionally more stable connections will form. And even in totally structured water, there will be areas of the water that are not structured, that don't have any molecular coherence. I think of it as kind of like if you imagine the Arctic Ocean, you can have icebergs floating around, and that in this case represents the molecular clusters. And each of these molecular clusters actually acts as a memory cell. And you might have larger conglomerates of molecular clusters. You can even, if you've read Dr. Pollack's books, I'm sure you're familiar with, he says they're kind of like sheets of matrices in a way. So you can either have more of those or less of those, but what we're talking about in either case is how many and how strong are the hydrogen bonds. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of hydrogen bonds. There's like van der Waals bonds and electrostatic bonds, and there are a few kinds of hypothetical bonds that haven't been proven yet, but that might account for some of water's more anomalous behaviors. Regardless, I think of all of these different kinds of hydrogen bonds as being like different kinds of relationships in the water. You have family relationships, you have friend relationships, you have romantic relationships, and we need a diversity of different relationships in our lives to keep us really healthy and well balanced, right? And it's the same with water. So when water is bulk, when there are not many relationships forming between the hydrogen atoms, those atoms can't get together and communicate with one another. They can't pass information because they're just forming and breaking apart billions of times per second, right? But water's intelligence, water's memory, and water's capacity to conduct literal voltage comes down to how strong is the community within the water, how strong are the family bonds. In fact, one of my favorite kinds of therapeutic waters is called double helix water. It was just discovered back in the 90s, so it's relatively recent, but absolutely profound and could give us enormous insights into the origin of life itself, not to mention our own capacity for healing as bodies of water. Again, it's called double helix water. It was discovered by researcher David Gann and Yin Lo, Dr. Yin Lo, Yin, something like that. Anyways, I highly recommend their book. And I have DHW, I have double helix water available on waterislife.shop as well. But basically, they're these 100 nanometer pairs of stabilized water cells, basically. Like they're just water, but they're like cells, and they're at an atomic level, not even at a molecular level, they're at an atomic level. You need an atomic force microscope just to see this, which is why it was never discovered until so recently, because an atomic force microscope is like, it's like the Hubble telescope of a microscope. So it costs $10,000 an hour just to rent one, and it'll take multiple hours for you to even find one of these double helix strands within the water. But here's where it gets interesting with relation to relationships inside of water, because the way that they create double helix water is by entangling atoms within the water. So they have this property of quantum entanglement, and then they spread them so far apart, they dilute the water so much that it's almost like there's absolutely nothing present of them left whatsoever. But because they were entangled, they love each other so much, these two little atoms. They miss each other so much that the force of that love generates so much energy in the water that you get the creation of these double helix spirals of little 100 nanometer pairs of water cells. And it's believed that this could be how life first formed in the primordial soup, and how DNA ever formed, because your DNA is only held in its chiral shape, its chiral structure, because of the highly structured water molecules inside of the strands of DNA. And so aging really is just a phenomenon of a loss of structure in the water molecules inside of your DNA. Anyways, I'm going off on tangents here, but I wanted to tell you about DHW, double helix water, because of the relationships formed between the water molecules there. And in general, when we're talking about structured water, we're talking about it having strong familial and communal ties, because you can kind of think of like the crystalline matrices, the different sacred geometries that are formed by these crystalline matrices, as being like different kinds of cultures, because each one has the capacity to carry a different spectrum of the electromagnetic field. And all culture is just made up of different kinds of relationships. And the stronger and more beautiful and more artistic the culture, the stronger and more beautiful the relationships that it's made of. And so it's no wonder really when we're all drinking highly disconnected, highly isolated, highly aggressive water with no cohesion to the water molecules, that the societies we live in have no coherence either. The quality of human relationships has suffered so much. I saw a study recently that said that since the 1970s, empathy, the quality of empathy, has dropped by about 70%. We're suffering from an epidemic of isolation. And who's to say which came first, the chicken or the egg? But I do know for sure that what we do to water, we do to ourselves. And we are drinking very lonely, very disconnected, very aggressive water. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the societies that we live in. So relationships is a very strong aspect, a very important aspect of water's health. The next would be your light and energy and environment and electromagnetic stimuli. So even if you eat the healthiest food in the entire world, but you never get out in the sunshine or in the moonlight or ground your feet on the soil, you're still not going to be that healthy, unfortunately, because you need the full spectrum of electromagnetic influences. You need to keep your body grounded. You need to have an excess of well-charged electrons in your body at all times, and you really need the information that comes through the light spectrum And it's the same with water. Water really responds to every single minute stimuli out in nature. She's constantly being exposed not only to the sun and the moon, but also to the stars. Theodore Schwenk actually showed that water responds with exquisite precision to the movements of the stars. And one theory is that the reason why astrology has any effect on us whatsoever is because of the effect that it has on our water molecules, because we can see that effect in nature and in a laboratory. We can see that under certain astrological influences, water actually behaves differently in the lab. And so what we're doing when we divorce water from nature, we're also divorcing water from the full spectrum of electromagnetic influences that mature her. So we talk about mature and immature water. We talk about juvenile water and elderly water. If you want more on water's life cycle and what all of that means specifically, I have a blog and a YouTube video available on that, so you can go check that out. I think it's fascinating. We're not going to get into all of that today, but I do just want to say that we need the full spectrum of light. Water also needs the full spectrum of light, and that's one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of Analemma, because they've actually matured water over the course of an entire year, so that the water is consistently exposed to all of the cycles of nature. She's gone through all of the seasons. Water is going to respond very differently in the winter than she does in the summer. And so to get a really mature, really well-rounded water, you need the full spectrum. So Analemma does that really well. They mature a feminine water for an entire year and a masculine water for an entire year, and then alchemically they join them together and put them in this wand, and through the process of epitaxy and transference, they can actually communicate those properties to your drinking water as well. So yeah, it's basically like the difference between if you were to just sit inside and play video games and watch horror movies all day, the information that you are exposing yourself to is life-degrading information. And yet, what do we do to water? We put her through, holding tanks and heavy metal pipes and just really degrading, life-degrading influences. But water needs entertainment and education just as much as we do. And this is the process of maturation, of maturing water through basically educating her. Another way of saying this is to say programming your water. I don't love that term because it makes her sound like kind of an inanimate computer, but that's basically what it is, because, as it's been said, water is the most advanced computer that the universe could possibly create. I mean, she is a storehouse of consciousness itself, and so you absolutely can influence the patterning, the programming, or you could say the education of your water during the maturation process. Another tool that I really love for this is called an infopathy pad, and again, you can find all of this, everything I'm mentioning, at waterslife.shop. And with an infopathy pad, actually I have my note here. So with this, it turns blue and it's plugged in, and you connect it to a certain kind of frequency. You can choose any frequency whatsoever. Unveiling Obscurity says, can Analemma structure any type of water? Yes, any kind of water for sure. In fact, they've even, I heard Dolph speaking recently. Dolph is the main researcher. I think he said that they did studies on water that had high content of chlorine, and they were working with the Analemma with that water, and it actually caused the chlorine to dissipate much faster. So yeah, it will work with any kind of water. So, but infoceutical water is really exciting because you can program water with any specific kind of frequency. So, I mean, any frequency. You can program water with ayahuasca frequencies, or with medicinal mushroom frequencies, or psychedelic mushroom frequencies. If you want to microdose without actually microdosing, you can do that. One of my favorite things to program my water with the infopathy pad is oxytocin. So I'll do the oxytocin molecule, or sometimes before I do a podcast interview or something like that, I have a whole nootropic stack of like alpha GPC and beta brainwaves and all of these different, like a whole stack of different things to just help me focus and concentrate. have better memory. There's also a stack of different beauty remedies that I impart into the water that I really, really love. There's different, cellular health and genetic health ones that you can do. I mean, you name it. Any vitamin, any mineral, any homeopathic substance, you can program the water with any of that. So ultimately, it saves hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars off of your supplements bill every month. It's absolutely so worth it. I mean, I remember back when I lived in the States, I used to spend like at least $100, maybe $200 a month on supplements. And the infoceutical pad definitely gets rid of the need for all of that. Even Kangen splits the molecules apart. Yes, so Kangen splits the molecules apart, so there's no structure in Kangen water or in that kind of water at all. Desert Spartan says, have you looked into the pristine hydro water filter? Yes, in fact, I think I have that one available on my site. It's not my favorite, but it's good. It'll do the job. You just want to make sure that you're still bringing structure and energy back into the water. So again, the process that I teach is filter, structure, balance, and energize. And I go deep into the science and all of the practices and DIY methods and free methods, as well as strategic paid methods in the Navigating the Waters e-course. So if you want a deep dive on exactly how to do it, including all of the lifestyle strategies to improve your absorption of water and your intracellular hydration, that's all in the Navigating the Waters e-course. Or if you just want to jump straight into implementation, then you can go to waterslife.shop, and all of the categories are broken up into those steps as well. So if you know that you have your filtration nailed, but you need something for structure, you need something for energy, you can navigate in that way. Hopefully that simplifies things. I rearranged the whole website recently to make it easier to navigate, because I kept getting the feedback like, oh, this is so overwhelming, there's so much here. So hopefully it's a little bit easier for people now. Anyway, so what are some other ways that you can mature your water? Well, homeopathy in and of itself is a type of maturation of water, where you expose water to a particular vibrational stimuli or a particular herb or something like that, but then you dilute it to such an extent that only the vibrational resonance is left in the actual water and none of the substance itself. And that's actually basically what we're doing with the infopathy pad as well. You're basically creating your own at-home homeopathic remedies where only the vibration of whatever you want is in the water. Let's see what else. Well, of course, there's creating moon water and star water. That's an ancient practice. If you're going to create sun water, I would recommend not leaving it out in the sun for very long, because you just need the vibrational pattern of sunshine. You don't need it to steep in the sun. What happens when water steeps in sunlight is the hydrogen bonds start to loosen. They start to break apart. Anytime water is heated, the bonds start to loosen. You can think of it as like the difference between ice, which is very cold, and so the molecules are very tightly packed together, versus vapor, because the warmer that water gets, the more those bonds loosen, and with water vapor, it's very, very dispersed, right? And so we want to make sure water is happiest at 4 degrees Celsius. That's really the anomaly point of water. She keeps her structure most stable at 4 degrees Celsius. Well, I was going to talk about that next anyway, so I guess we'll jump straight to that part, because body temperature is an important factor in your health, right? Just like you need to maintain a body temperature of, 98.6 degrees. Water also, although she is very, very versatile, and she can be at any temperature, even thousands and thousands of degrees. The water that's inside the sun, superionic and amorphous ice, burns at thousands of degrees. Plasma water burns at thousands of degrees. But she really is happiest at 4 degrees. That's where she maintains her structure the longest, but where she maintains her temperature the strongest is at 98.6 degrees. Isn't that amazing? Everything that water does, all of these anomalous properties of water, she defies the laws of physics just to be the one thing in the cosmos that's capable of sustaining and supporting and embodying life. It always amazes me. So when water is at 98.6 degrees, it'll take a lot more energy for her to either warm up or cool down, because that's her most stable temperature point. Whereas when water is at 4 degrees, and that's Fahrenheit, I don't know what that is Celsius. When water is at 4 degrees Celsius, then it'll take a lot more energy for the molecular bonds to either loosen or strengthen, because that's where she's strongest in her structure. Desert Spartan says, how strong are the effects from the infopathy? I don't know how you want me to answer that. That's a very, it's not like there's a scale from 1 to 10, you know. In terms of like how often you would need to drink the water to see the effects, it really varies. Like typically you would want to drink water programmed with a certain pattern, like 3 to 4 times a day, to start seeing a significant difference with that particular patterning. But again, it depends on your lifestyle and other factors as well, because, you know, for example, if you are drinking the infoceutical remedy for lung cancer, but you're still smoking a pack a day, I mean, it's, you know, it's going to take longer to see that effect. So that's really just a subjective question. I can't answer specifically. Power and Pleasure says, loving this. Oh, thank you for everything. Oh, what tools, items, practices would you recommend for someone who has a nomadic lifestyle? Great question. So if you go to waterslife.shop and you type in portable in the search bar, you'll find all of the portable things. Personally, I've been nomadic for the past 3 years, a little over 3 years. And I only just got like a place to really start putting some roots down recently and fully unpacking. But before that, I was really mostly living in suitcases. So I absolutely feel you. And there are definitely strategies that work. You just want to make sure that you're still covering all of those steps: filter, structure, balance, and energize. And then also putting in place the hydrating lifestyle practices that make your body more receptive to that. And a lot of that kind of stuff is portable. So it depends on where you're traveling as to whether or not you'll want to get bottled water or find some kind of water filter. It's so case by case specific. I can't give you a blanket answer right now, but if you want to book a one-on-one hydration consultation, you can find that at waterslife.teachable.com, and we can come up with a personalized strategy for you, something that'll work really well for your lifestyle. Do you recommend drinking water at a specific temperature then? You know, there's a lot of back and forth on this around water temperature. I was actually chatting with Veda Austin about this recently, because according to the Ayurvedic tradition, you want to drink warm or room temperature water. There's this practice called Ushapan, where you drink warm water first thing in the morning. And in general, I would say you don't want to drink cold water before, during, or after eating meals, because it can quell the digestive fires. But if you're someone who is doing a lot of heavy exercise, or you're in a weight loss program or something like that, then drinking cold water can actually raise your metabolism if it's done on an empty stomach. So it really just depends. I would say go with your gut on that one. If you are harvesting raw wild spring water, or you're structuring quantities of water all at once, then you want to make sure to keep it cool. If you can, keep it in a cool, dark place, because that'll help it keep its structure better. What else do we want to talk about? Oh yeah, so body temperature. So, oh no, well, actually I just want to go back for a second, because while we were talking about maturing water, some other things that you can use for energizing and maturing water are Vediant drops, which are highly energized, and charging your water in an odic charger, which basically concentrates etheric energy into the water. That would be something like a carbon gene. I use my carbon genes every night. I mature the water overnight in the fridge, and then I drink a shot of it in the morning. You really don't need more than a shot. It's very energized, and they're amazing. They will even make personalized custom ones specifically for your own biology. So that's called the carbon gene. So I just wanted to make sure we covered those before we moved on. And then while we're talking about body temperature as an aspect of health as well, this, I wasn't sure whether to put it in the aeration category or the body temperature category, because it kind of is its own thing, but deuterium depleted water, because the way that you make deuterium depleted water is through highly intensive processes of changing temperature gradients, and that will actually deplete the water, or deplete the deuterium within the water. So you can actually get rid of the excess neutrons in the hydrogen atoms by doing that. You can't really do it at home very effectively, unfortunately, which is why you really have to buy deuterium depleted water, because it's done in a laboratory. You absolutely can enrich your water with extra protein hydrogen through the methods that we talked about earlier in the aeration and breathing section. But when it comes to deuterium depleted water, it is, again, one of the most healing things in the world. Hydrogen really is the panacea. So highly recommend that. We're coming up on an hour, so let's see if there's anything else we wanted to cover. The final thing that I wanted to cover is your microbiome. So one of the other most important factors in your health as a body of water is your microbiome. We are not just human beings, we are a very diverse ecosystem of various beings. And for every one cell in your body, you have 1.3 other organisms. You are literally more other organisms than you are your own self. And so the diversity of our inner ecology is one of the most important factors for our overall health. I remember reading a quote from a microbiologist one time who said, we basically have an unchecked drug factory in our guts at all times, because the microbiome within your gut is responsible for generating so many of your neurochemical experiences, so many of your hormonal experiences. It's responsible for so much of your immunity and just everything else. That there's a really strong tie between your hydration and your gut microbiome. It's one of the things that we look at when I do one-to-one consultations with people and we're going over their lifestyle strategies. Because if you have a depleted microbiome, which most people do, I mean, there's a genocide of the microbiome going on right now that equates to the loss of species that we're experiencing in this mass extinction event that we're going through. Like, people literally drink chlorine all the time. That's a biocide. That is like literally committing a little mini genocide of your gut microbiome every time you drink that water. And a lot of us are experiencing a decline in our microbiome as well, because we're not hydrating with water that can actually hydrate those microorganisms. So these microorganisms, many of them are so small that the only water that they can drink, they're living beings, they need to drink water too. We're not just hydrating for us, we're hydrating for them. And they can only drink microclustered water that is well structured, like natural water would be. And so when you're drinking water that is bulk, a lot of times the size of the molecular clusters are just too big and disorganized for them to even fit through these tiny little microorganisms in your gut microbiome. So one thing that people don't usually realize is that when you drink raw, wild, living spring water, fresh harvested from nature, that actually is a probiotic supplement. That water contains innumerable beneficial bacteria and microorganisms. So, I mean, when we're talking about the microbiome, it's not just beneficial bacteria within us. There's also the microbiome, which is all of the beneficial viruses within us. There's the mycobiome, as in mycology, all of the beneficial fungi within us. You are basically a hologram of Mother Earth in every way. And so we really want to nurture that microbiome diversity within us by drinking really high quality water, and by drinking water that has not been deprived of her own microbiome. So again, most of the water that we drink is so sterilized that it no longer has that capacity to be a probiotic supplement in and of itself. And there's really only one product I've ever found that will actually restore a microbiome to water itself. I mean, of course, you can take probiotic and prebiotic supplements, and I have those available on the site as well in the supplements category. But really, my approach is to make water herself as whole, healthy, and well-rounded as possible through hygiene and movement and food and breath and relationships and maturation and education and microbiome and body temperature and all of these things that make you healthy. Let's do all of that to our water and then drink that water, right? So the one product that I've found that actually enriches her microbiome is called Kelby Ceramics. So it's Qelby, and it's basically a specific type of clay that is very rich in microorganisms, and it's fired in such a way that the microorganisms stay within the clay and then they actually kind of go into this dormant state, and when you put them in water, they become active again. So that's one way to enrich the microbiome of your water. Or you can forego the need for all of this and just go straight to the source and get the absolute healthiest water that there is in the world, and that is right at your local nearby spring. So go to findaspring.com to find your nearby spring, and I have spring water foraging and harvesting tools, bottles, vessels, tests, all of that at waterislife.shop. And I think that was all I wanted to cover with you guys today, just a little over an hour. So yeah, let me know if you have any final questions in the chat before we close it out. Let me know if this was helpful. Let me know if you learned something new, if you had an aha moment. Let's see, do I have any events coming up soon that I want to announce? Oh, well, if anyone is in Austin, I'm actually going back to the States for the first time in years this Friday in Austin. Come find us at the Modern Nirvana event. I'll be there with Natural Action, so you can get your Natural Action Portable Revitalizer there. Awesome. Breath of Jaguar, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. Glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, that's it for me, I guess. Over and out, guys. Thanks so much for joining. Have a beautiful, beautiful day and stay hydrated.